how crazy is it that like, okay, Steph Curry and like all these people are literally putting their NFT up on their profile saying, hey, and the way I look at it is they're saying I'm a banker. Like, I'm controlling my own assets. This is what I'm doing. Like, I'm a part of this community that controls our own assets. I'm holding scarcity on the internet.
You're listening to the Unstoppable Podcast, the go-to place for everyone to learn about the latest innovations in Web3, NFTs, and the decentralized web. Welcome to the Metaverse. GM, welcome to the Unstoppable Podcast. We've got a fantastic guest today. I'm with Adam Draper, Managing Director at Boost VC and investor in Unstoppable Domains. Adam, welcome to the show. How you doing?
I like GM. So I'll say that. Thanks for having me on the show. Really excited to talk to you, Josh. This is going to be awesome.
Yeah, I've started to do a lot of research into you because you are an investor in Unstoppable, and just I've watched some of your podcast interviews. I like the energy you bring, and I think it's just a fresh voice and perspective in Web3. It's an exciting time to be contributing to the space as a builder, a creator, an investor, and that really bleeds through, I think, in a lot of what you share with the world online.
Yeah, there's something about where good energy is, value is built. And I think that from the beginning, when we started focusing, so 10 years ago, we were the first investors to focus in the Bitcoin space. And so we started to invest in Bitcoin-related startups. And the reason we were compelled to was because all of the humans in that industry were so excited, and they understood how important the technology was going to be to the future. And so we just want to surround ourselves with those builders. We've spent the last 10 years really attracting people like that, whether that be in Web3, crypto, DeFi, jetpacks, exoskeletons. And so we really just we're attracted to that type of business. So Boost VC, we're the accelerator for sci-fi. Our mission is to accelerate the sci-fi future. We want to invest in important things that can impact 9 billion people. Thus, we are investors in Unstoppable.
Heck yeah. Well, we're going to dive into your thesis on Unstoppable in just a minute, and Web3 in general. But I'd like to start out, I start every episode, I just want to get a brief intro into how you got into Web3 and investing in this space to begin with, for all our listeners who may not be familiar with you and your background.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, Web3. Yeah, okay. Well, I guess it depends how you define it. To me, 10 years ago, I had a coffee with a very special person named Brian Armstrong. He is the CEO of Coinbase, and we had it at this place called Red Rock, and in Mountain View, California. And I always attribute all of my meetings with people who ended up becoming billion-dollar companies to the place where it was, and I have hit a lot of dingers from Red Rock, so I thank Red Rock for all of the coffees I've had. Actually, I wasn't even drinking coffee at that time. I was drinking hot chocolate, so that should give a little more perspective and shade to the industry. And I met Brian Armstrong, and he said, at some point the world's going to be on one financial infrastructure. I believe it's going to be Bitcoin. That at that time, that was the only one that really existed. And we are going to be the gateway. We're going to be the gateway to get you there. Easiest way to buy Bitcoin. And in my head, I was thinking, why isn't it on one infrastructure? We can email, we can message, we can call anyone on the planet. But for some reason, value has all these middlemen and all these problems globally. And it made it, what that conversation did was it made me curious. And I started to have more conversations with more Bitcoin people. And those Bitcoin people were like the most dynamic, interesting people I'd ever met. And so I really just followed the breadcrumbs of this energy and realized that there was something special happening in this industry. And so so that led me to going all in on Bitcoin. So I ended up about 3 months later actually buying Bitcoin. So I invested in Coinbase, and then 3 months later I bought some Bitcoin. And so I actually invested in a company in crypto before I bought some Bitcoin. And then over the next, I guess 10 years, we've invested in all sorts of different, whether it be crypto, Bitcoin, blockchain, DeFi related projects. Some of those being like Etherscan, which if you're in Ethereum, like you've probably used that product. We are obviously investors in Unstoppable Domains, which we're incredibly excited about for the, I thought of it as pre-programmable freedom of speech. And then we were the first investors in Nifty Gateway. We were first investors in Moon 21 shares. We were the first investors in a lot of company, Repio, ShakePay, like a lot of gateways, a lot of DeFi, and a lot of NFT, Web3 related stuff. Which it wasn't. So what your question though is what brought me here, and what brought me here was it was never really about crypto or Web3 or any of that. At first, there's the following of energy and great people. But the movement I've really been investing towards for a very long time is the movement of bringing great services to the individual. And so what crypto is all about is becoming your own bank. Suddenly, as my own bank, I'm able to get the same goods and services. Before crypto, you were either banked or you were unbanked. That was it. Like governments either banked you or they unbanked you. Like there was no, and it was governments and institutions and whoever, banked or unbanked. But what we built on the internet was this third option. We built a third option in an alternative space where you could have your own services. And that option comes with downsides, right? Like security and like all slow, sort of. Like there are a lot of things that are like not perfect about it. But it's a competitive space that's going to make the financial markets better. And like I think that is one of the most exciting and empowering and powerful movements that can exist. And so that's really what brought me to Web3, crypto, DeFi. It's all been a part of that line. And at first, the thing I'll say is, I think a lot of people think about this a little differently than I do. Like they think of each individual thing like cut up into different pieces. But what crypto gave us was scarcity on the internet. One thing. It gave us one, like, that's it. Like, I can verifiably prove that there is one thing on the internet. And that's what Bitcoin was. And so for computer scientists, which was the first group, the first demographic that really picked up on this, they were, like, trying to play with ways in which scarcity on the internet mattered. And Bitcoin was the obsession. Now, over time, Ethereum broke out and realized, hey, we need a way to fundraise, and engineers need to be able to actually use the programming language, and then we need, and then they also launched at the same time as the ERC-20 smart contract. They launched a ERC-721, which is the NFT smart contract. That took a little longer to go, and the reason was we went from computer scientists, and then Ethereum launched, to financial people. So finance sort of started to be playing with this idea of scarcity on the internet. And then and so we came out, we emerged with DeFi, and suddenly people are giving out lending products and staking products and like different things that are native to the industry, and they're moving from finance to crypto and DeFi. The third wave that we hit when NFTs sort of started to really pick up was artists had a new business model. And artists come in all shapes and forms. They come in forms of entertainers, basketball players, movie stars. Like, artists are entertainer. It's this entertainment industry that really, and everyone in gaming, and everyone's starting to realize that NFTs were the gateway drug for entertainment to really understand this scarcity on the internet, which they're all still experimenting with. And so each industry we're starting to like rapidly experiment and learn more about. And that's what it's all about. It's different methods in which I get to become in charge of my own assets, right? And that's the goal. The goal is me in charge of my own assets.
Yeah, that's a lot to pull apart there from what you just went over. I mean, from the talk with Brian Armstrong, and you mentioned his statement about one financial infrastructure for the entire world, and then to where we are today with all these different sectors of Web3, DeFi, NFTs. There's this whole finance component. Do you still see that like one financial infrastructure playing out? Because I think that on one hand scares some people when they think about, oh, how does that integrate with government and the way we actually like have a civilized society, and then, but on the other hand, you bring up this scarce digital assets and how the blockchain and all these really interesting and useful like technologies being built on it allow everybody around the world to participate in the same in the same arena. And I struggle sometimes trying to differentiate between, is this possible to have this one infrastructure, but then on the other hand, I see it working out, and I see people all over the world collaborating on entertainment and finance and these digital assets that they own. So I'd like your take on how you see that kind of playing out, especially as we have more and more regulation on the horizon.
I'll start by saying a Dune quote, which is "Fear is the mind killer," and the reason is a wise person, one of my friends, his name's Colin West. He said, "Anytime I made a decision out of fear, it was the wrong decision." Right, and like. I've started to realize that the things like that you can control what you can control, fearing the impending doom of government regulation, all that stuff, in crypto has always been the wrong move. And the reason is government keeps legitimizing it, like every single time. So the first time, like God, what was the very first time government looked at it? They said, "Oh, it is money." I forget which group, but they actually wrote, hey, digital currency is currency, so it has to be in the money transmitter bucket, right? And everyone was like, oh, man, this is going to be the worst thing ever. This is going to be horrible. Turned out to be the best thing ever. Like, price rocketed. Everyone jumped into the market. The price went from, like, $20 to $100. Like, everyone was really, like, it legitimized it because when the government starts saying something, it's like promoting the idea that it's real. Before it was fake. And then the government said it's real, and everyone goes, "Oh, okay, like this is legit. Okay, yeah, I'll try that. It looks fun. I'm on the internet a lot. Might as well own some piece of it." But the main question around like, can this one financial infrastructure for the planet work? I'd say the last 15 years, actually my entire life, like has been defined by an experiment. An experiment of 4 billion people hooked up to one network, and we're trying, and we got to 4 billion people over the course of the last 4.5 billion people, however many people are actually on the internet, connected through phones, laptops, whatever, and now we're a global village, like and we don't know what that means, and so I feel that people are so. There are all these polarizing things you read, right? Like, but when you meet people in the real world, they're actually pretty rational human beings on both sides. Like whenever there's this like hot take that everyone's like fighting over, whether it's masks or vaccines or whatever it is, everyone's pretty rational. Like when you actually talk to them in person. And I'm massively generalizing, but like I always feel, and I feel that what NFTs are giving us is a way to congregate around interests, or Web3 is giving us a way to congregate around interests so that we can build together. And I've seen more collaborative pitches around Web3 and NFTs than I've ever really seen, because everyone has to think community first. They have to think about who's going to be involved, how are they going to build, and sometimes the founders are a little greedy. They try to they're going to try to take more than they should. But like in general, everyone's really for this general idea of collaborative building. The reason that I bought a Bored Ape, I have a Bored Ape over here, which is ironic a little bit because here, I'll try to show it if this is going to be a video.
Nice.
And
we'll
which is
put
a little
it up
ironic
on the YouTube video.
Yeah, perfect. which is a little ironic because the hopefully you can't see. Well, no, you can see whatever you want. The it's a physical print of a digital asset, which is sort of a funny thing that I think it's sort of funny to go the opposite direction. Hey, this was built for native digital, and now we're. But I think that Bored Apes, I think CryptoPunks, different sets of these community-driven NFTs, it's massively scaling something like what Disney would be, where you're able to build out communities and build on top of the idea of what the network represents. And so there's already Bored Ape comics. There's already the Jenkins, they're writing a book as a team, a collaborative team.
Jenkins the valet.
Yeah, Jenkins the valet. And then there are all these things where suddenly we're collaborating around an interest where everyone was attracted to the idea of and thought these characters were cute or represented themselves, and then they develop their own personalities. It's almost like we're in a game, right? Like we're almost playing a game, trying to create identity and personality and figure out where the value is. So my answer is
totally.
Also the other thing is I think this year, I mean, it was like 3 weeks ago, I was like, whoa, the number of bank accounts in the U.S., like there are more people who own crypto than have a bank account in the U.S., which, like, that flip is pretty crazy. And that means that we are actually driving the value, whether or not people are sort of skeptical of what NFTs represent or skeptical. Like, people are taking control of their own assets, and it is filling a need. It's filling an actual desire of like having a bank account, which also means there are people who didn't have bank accounts who do own crypto. And I think we need to grow that number. Like that number needs to grow in order to actually make this thing work.
Yeah, the number on, I have it pulled up actually. The status for the first time, the number of U.S. citizens holding crypto is 24%, has surpassed the number of citizens with a savings account, which is 23%. So yeah, I thought that was super interesting too. And it shows maybe one, how crypto is growing, and two, maybe a broader picture of how I would say people are looking for alternative investment assets when they're not finding those returns in the traditional stock market game. And, you're a VC and you have access to a lot of deals that I would say people like me and probably a lot of people in like the millennial generation and younger, like don't have access to, right? And when you're trying to save for a house or just pay off student loans, I think we're all looking for crypto as our asymmetric upside bet versus just the stock market. So
that's super interesting. I talk to more and more college kids now, and like they're definitely all like trading crypto. And if you did it in the last year, you did really well, except for the last 3 months, right? And so but think of the financial education you get from doing that, from on a smaller scale, maybe you made a lot of money, maybe you didn't, but you made money, you lost money, you start to develop your own thesis around how money works. I think one of the things that Bitcoin really drove, and the reason I love Bitcoin so much, is like it drove a conversation around what money is. Like, have you ever had, like, I mean, how crazy is it that, like, okay, Steph Curry and like all these people are literally putting their NFT up on their profile saying, hey, and the way I look at it is they're saying I'm a banker. Like, I'm controlling my own assets. This is what I'm doing. Like, I'm a part of this community that controls our own assets. I'm holding scarcity on the internet, and I'm taking control of that. And like, I think it's wild to think of like all these entertainers who are actually promoting the general idea of like scarcity on the internet and taking control of your own assets, because at like 10 years ago, the idea of like them saying I'm a banker would have been silly, right? Like they would have never wanted to say that. They would have never. Crypto gives us the ability to translate a lot of these common interests into different ways, where people in finance definitely migrate more to DeFi because it's something they understand, but it's still just about scarcity. Where entertainment migrates to IP because that's something they understand, but it's still just scarcity on the internet. Like we're translating all those assets to an equilibrium where there's no difference between startups or crypto or anything, comic books. Like, we're starting to say if someone globally feels that it is valuable, it is valuable. And like, if you get a community of people to believe that, it's real. And like, that's the trust. To your previous question about governance, I generally think that people are about government sort of like impacting regulation. It's going to be a thing, obviously. But do you really think a senator is going to be like, hey, I'm going to be the senator that regulates Bored Apes? Like, do you think someone's going to be like, oh, this is the hill I die on, is like regulating Mickey Mouse? You know, I think that there's a certain amount of like silliness that allows innovation to play. And I think that the reason that people moved from Bitcoin to Ethereum to DeFi to NFTs to Web3, like the reason these things happened was because people kept escaping to an easier, less regulated area. And so it's always about, hey, well, there's this other thing, this isn't the same thing, and we're going to speculate, learn about it, figure out how this works differently. And I think that it's driven so much innovation that like people can't ignore the space anymore. There's senators who are saying, I'm for Bitcoin. Like, to me, that's such a success. Like, that's such a huge move, and that like people are arguing about it on the government level. El Salvador owning a bunch of Bitcoin, like Bitcoin might go down over the next 2 years, but like straight up. I don't know. I've been in the market so long, like it goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down. And it's normal. It sort of breathes. It sort of like goes, and it goes straight up, straight up, straight up. And then it's like choppy, 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 choppy. And then, it drops down. People take a big, deep breath. And then it breathes again because innovation was built and like really great stuff. And people stay in it for the right reasons. So I think we're going to get to the point where the incentives align with the government loving it, to the point where you can't like just be like, oh, this is horrible. So I think we need more people who are going to be in government to own Bitcoin or Ethereum or any of that stuff. And so, I voted. I'm starting to find people who are pro Bitcoin, and I'm trying to donate some money to those candidates because I think that's an important mission over the next little bit of time. I think Ryan Selkis is doing a really good job of sort of like saying that a lot. So.
That might have been, I can't remember. I live in Oregon. That might have been the Oregon Center I saw you shout out on Twitter recently. Yep. But I'll have to look into him because to be honest, I am not familiar with his platform. But I mean, you just covered like NFT communities and how we're turning these assets into games, and it's fun. And I think that's very interesting to like pull on and touch on for a second. As we turn, like NFTs allow us to turn everything into this financial asset, whether right now it's a Bored Ape, but soon it could be your car, your resume, and basically any asset you own. I just feel like we're going to be starting to sending all these assets around, like everything becomes money. Whereas right now, I would say very few things are money. And the more I experiment with it, and you talked about getting your education in crypto, like, yeah, I've made some really good trades and I've made some not so good ones, but after all of them, I'm learning along the way, and it's making me more comfortable with making like future decisions. But something I realize is like betting, and especially with crypto and NFTs, has felt like the most real life game I've ever played. and all of a sudden, like, what happens when just everything becomes this internet game you're playing, and you're just sending, it's like the huge game of Monopoly, and you're acquiring assets, you're sending them, you're getting pictures, and I don't know. I think it's pulling a lot of people in, and hopefully as we start identifying with certain communities, it will continue to evolve. But what you also said about what you're seeing right now, I'd like to ask you about the deals you're seeing come across your desk, and like from the companies or even the founders. You said it's become more community and like common interest driven than you've ever seen before. Are you like how is what you've seen come to you for investment changed just even in the last year than in your whole 10
Well, I'll
years
even
in
talk
crypto?
about the evolution of like how deals have been structured, like in sort of crypto in general. First, I actually think a lot of people they scoff at speculation and sort of the gambling, as you put it, that goes on in NFTs and crypto in general. And I think it drives so much adoption and so much education that it's completely worth it. And like at the end of the day, yes, you can have a gambling problem, you can have a trading problem, but if you learn enough, you start to be like, I'm not a trader. I will lose that game all day. Like, I will lose that game. But on a 10-year timeline, I'm very good at buying and holding, and especially finding people who are actually trying to build enduring businesses. And that's the goal, right? Like, my goal as a venture capitalist, it's a 10, 20-year game where I'm trying to find the people who are actually going to be building these things for the long run. Okay, the way things have changed, man, the first time someone pitched me tokens, man, people forget this stuff. Like, the first time someone said tokens to me during a VC pitch, I was like, but what do I own though? And they go, well, it's this token that, and I'm like, so you're just like creating a token and then I'm going to own a piece of that token? And they're like, yeah, like, but there's value because of X, Y, but the first time you see that, there is fear. There's like this moment of fear where it's a little different. Like you don't really trust it because you've been investing in equity of a company your whole life, or you've been investing in like there's a very specific way that we've been doing things in venture capital. And the first time, Golem. It was Golem, which is compute power, like and it was an ERC 21 smart contract. And I don't want to say what the deal Boost probably could have gotten was, but like it was, they pitched us and I was like, I gave him feedback. I really liked the guy. I thought, and I sent them feedback, and he went full time after the email, and like he actually said thank you at one point. But like we didn't invest, and even if you're skeptical of Golem and like all that stuff, it would have been a great investment. Like it would have been a really good investment, and the project is actually still very interesting to me. And so the thing we missed on was like there is this. So again, fear is the mind killer. Like the fear of like a new thing that you're not sure you trust, right? And that was a very difficult hurdle to overcome until you heard it 5 times. And so what Boost VC was very good at was we were in the right pool of people who were pitching us that all the time. After the 5th one, you have to be like, okay, well, something's happening with tokens. We got to figure this out, basically. And so, we ended up investing in Decentraland through Mana. We ended up participating in a lot of these ICOs because the tokens we were pretty sure the tokens were going to have value, even though we didn't necessarily understand what that value was yet and what it was driven by. Fast forward a little bit. Sorry, I feel like I'm lecturing a history lesson of crypto, but no,
I'm finding it interesting to hear how like you approach it, and maybe when you tie it all together, how you think the average person should approach it, because I think you have the ability to, and VCs, and tell me if I'm wrong here because I'm definitely not one, but like you're willing to place maybe, let's just say 100 bets, and a lot of them may not work out because some of them are going to work out so well that it covers, your portfolio. So you're willing to take these massive high upside bets, but I would say the average person may not be, and you're learning and you're investing in things that you don't fully understand but think may have value. And I kind of want to push back on it and say, as we aim for global adoption and the average person wants to get involved, how do they think about all these too? Because, and maybe they're not investing at such an early stage as you, but when they're thinking about buying their first NFT, or they're thinking about buying a token themselves,
So, okay, well then okay, I'll get there. I'm going to finish the history lesson because then recently people have been pitching these NFT projects, right? Which is just tokens again for how you take ownership of a project. And sometimes the NFTs stay in the organization, and sometimes it's outside the organization. So you want to own some of the stuff outside the organization as well as inside the organization. And so these structures, people are rapidly prototyping where the value is, right? And that's, on a financial level, fascinating. Like being able to experiment with these asset classes, experiment with what the best way of like aligning incentives is. What we're doing is rapidly prototyping governance to align incentives in the best way. And so like at scale, that's the most exciting thing ever. Could we, I shouldn't say weaponize, but weaponize capital to be able to solve climate change? Could we weaponize capital to be able to solve the hardest problem, clean up the ocean? Could we find enough people who are aligned to actually create that change in the real world through Web3, through these other things? Okay, so, like one of the things I've learned, and I should say just to, if people are approaching it now to invest, whenever you feel that hint of fear, like think about it. Like my best investments weren't logically the least. They were probably full. They were full of fear for a very specific thing. You could say no to Coinbase for a very specific reason. You were, hey, this Bitcoin thing's not going to be a thing. Like, and that was the reason that basically no VCs invested. Everyone thinks Coinbase was an obvious winner 10 years ago. Like it wasn't obvious. It was they didn't raise their seed round. They raised $600,000 of their $1 million potential seed round. And they closed it because they were just like, hey, I'm going to get back to work. I'm going to take the money in and I'm going to figure this out. And so one of the things I've very much learned is trying to keep that, I don't know if the word is fear, but the fear in check, and thinking like, hey, but what if it could? What if it did work? Does that change how the world works? And that's probably the most important question I ask whenever I'm talking to a team. The other thing is, it's always about people. It's not about projects. So like at the end of the day, every single project is run by humans. Like there aren't AIs who are driving these things. People try to desensitize themselves through a stock price or a NFT price there are people in that organization. Is that organization attracting great people? Are they attracting more people? Is there a network effect to being a part of that group? Are those people really ambitious? Are they really trying to change something in the world? And those questions end up being able to drive you to which projects to be thinking about. Being able to ask the questions around humans, it turns out, is the thing that really defines like great investments from the others. And the one thing that crypto is full of is I don't think it's a bad thing. I don't know, but they aren't great startup builders, is short-term speculators. And so they're just not good at building startups. They're sort of a quick turnaround group of people. It does drive value to the network, but it doesn't drive as much value as building the platform over a 10-year period that makes the thing hum. And builds trust. What I have, the thing I have learned is trust is the token of the realm. Like trust, there's a guy named George Schultz, not Charles Schultz. Charles Schultz did Peanuts, but George Schultz. And he lived to be 100. And when he was turned to 100, he wrote 13 pages about his life. And it's called Trust is the Token of the Realm. And the summary of it, and I highly recommend reading it, but the summary of it is, when trust was highest in the room, magic happened. They were able to solve the hardest problems. They were able to make the biggest difference. And I have witnessed that firsthand, but the rooms have moved online. And so if you're able to actually build trust in the community online, if you're able to build trust in real world rooms, if it, like wherever you're able to build that trust, like you will be able to accomplish the goal. Those would
That's
be
so interesting.
I also, at the end of the day, if you don't want to participate, like find someone to manage your money, and that's what I do.
Totally. And I am like, for also anyone listening, like I am also just a very much holder. I am not a good trader. I learned that very quickly during the 2017 ICO boom. So now I just buy and hold, and I look for the things that I think are going to be impactful long term. But what you just said about like trust and find trust where it's the highest in the room, I think that applies so well to crypto, because on this one hand, we have the ability to have these permissionless trust ecosystem because of the blockchain, right? And being able to transact with people without knowing them, and know that my money can go somewhere, and if someone sends me money, it will come where I direct it, right? But at the same time, when talking about crypto, we have scams and these hacks that are attacking the NFT community in like recent weeks. And so the narrative gets so skewed, because I think real people in the weeds of Web3 and crypto, you see how we can have global trust, and that can lead to global collaboration and real building, right? But then in the news headlines, we kind of lose the sense of trust because of the infrastructure we're still building up around how people can manage their own assets and, have real custody over what they own. So I see that being just a competing force right now that's it's really working the kinks out.
So for the last 10 years, that's been I don't know if it's a problem, but it's the first way that people hear about crypto is always through a negative headline. The Silk Road marketplace, like buy drugs, whatever, like that was the first those were the big news stories about Bitcoin. Now it's really about privacy and hacks and that there are bad actors. I would say that's sort of the overarching, like, oh, well, I don't want to get in. It's an easy way to say I don't want to get in because, right? Like, I don't want to get in because my money will get stolen because I don't spend all my time in crypto. But if you take the time to just learn more, you start to realize that the number of actual bad actors is very few. And yes, I would say I still hold my breath every time I press an Ethereum send, right? Like, I don't feel that is perfectly done yet as a consumer. Maybe that's one of the reasons I'm such a hodler, is just because I pressing the button is actually still a little scary. Even on OpenSea, even on like all these things, it's still not a perfectly done thing. But once you get past that and you give like the community the benefit of the doubt that not everyone can be bad, and there are great, amazing people who are hugely supportive of it. The thing that got me out of the like, oh, maybe this is bad or whatever, was every single person I met was curious. They were all trying to figure out how to make this a bigger deal. They were trying, like Bill Bardite ended up leaving Boom Financial and founding Abra, which it's a crypto wallet. Sebastian Serrano, who we backed, ended up founding Repio, and he hunted me down at every event, which is why we ended up backing him. But it's the Coinbase of Latin America. It was just sort of like these people who were curious about it eventually got so obsessed that they started businesses to build value for the network. And that was awesome. And it's so exciting. And so now I think we're at the next rung of people, and we're seeing a lot. I would say that you were asking about what types of deals we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of deals that are starting gaming companies, because I think a lot of people saw Axie and Infinity and realized, hey, there might be like maybe we can build that, right? Take advantage of the idea of play to earn. Not many people have figured it out yet. Like, and there are a lot of these, and so that's one thing. And what I've realized is, I do think that Discord and NFTs are the lowest cost way to build intellectual property around a community. And what I mean, like, I think Bored Apes is a really good example. Like, they built intellectual property around a community. They have a Discord in order to collaborate on that community, and it reduces the cost of actually having anything physical. Moving atoms is always easier than moving bits, is how I always think about it. My AIM screen name was Adam, but AIM does no longer exist. ATOMADAM. That was a long time ago. But
clever.
Yeah, right? Adam. I think I had another one later, but uh, and so I think what's happening is we're starting to have the lowest cost to building community and trust around ideas. And so we're going to start, like, you get to choose which communities you want to be a part of. And, like, in every community, there's, the person who's trying to sell you an NFT, and there's someone trying to buy an NFT, and there's, like, that's great. But also, the people who are, the reason I'm going to point at Bored Ape again has been so successful is they gave you a roadmap. They've delivered. And they built that trust as a community to continue building the trust. And they built an engine of other people who own their own IP of Bored Apes, including myself, who continue to be a marketing machine. I've said it 5 times on this podcast for Bored Apes. And that's exciting. We're not a part of the same organization, but we're all fighting the same fight. Like, that's so exciting to me that we can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just going to say here, I have a mutant ape. I did have a Bored Ape originally, sold it along the way, but I have a mutant ape right now. That's my avatar on Twitter.
It.
But the so far on this podcast, since taking over as host, 3 out of the 5 guests I've interviewed have had Bored Apes, and myself have a mutant. And so it's even interesting seeing that marketing. I'm not trying to bring this up every episode, but it's just people who are into crypto and like all in. We have Bored Apes,
right? Like, and
yeah.
Even more exciting is there's a group that is unaffiliated with the Yuga Labs who launched Bored Ape Comic. And so they launched a comic book with the IP of their characters, and then they sold their own NFT off of it, and they made money to buy more Bored Apes. And
yeah, the way to use IP and like the way that NFT projects are composable and they build off each other, I love it. One thing I want to say about what you were talking about communities. At first, we start. And these communities are a great place to come together and learn. And I was thinking about how just broader like Web 2 internet, it allowed people to learn on YouTube. Like, I'm such a big YouTube University person.
100%.
And all of a sudden I can learn from people who aren't in my close vicinity. And I can find experts. I can find like experts outside of my, my hometown. I'm not constricted to just the teacher at my high school or my parents. Like, to be honest, my parents actually aren't very financially, I don't want to say like financially educated, but they're not big investors, right? So I learned everything about investing from from the people I found online. And then with NFTs, we introduced this community aspect. And now the online world is not just a place I learn, it's a place I can play. And you talk about these gaming companies that you're seeing come forward and how you can play to earn. And like, what gets me so excited, and sometimes when I'm talking to my friends, it feels like my head's just way up in the clouds, but I feel like we're about to transcend on the internet to a place where we now can live. And we went from learning to playing to living, and you can live with these communities too, even if you're not physically located together. But because we all have the same NFT, we can access the same metaverse plot of land, and we're all making the same passive token yield. And truth, it just feels like this internet is becoming so much more expansive in the fastest time frame I've ever seen.
Yeah, the thing that I always say is I think the metaverse, as everyone calls it now, it's really funny because we've been investors in the virtual reality space for a long time, and they were talking about the metaverse, in 2015 when crypto was talking about DeFi, and they were talking about NFT. They were talking not NFTs. They were talking about ICOs and then DeFi. And we heard the term metaverse, and then in the last 2 years, it completely flipped where only crypto companies were pitching us metaverse, and it was because a lot of the original metaverses of VR didn't end up panning out perfectly over the 3 years, even though they're gonna happen and it's gonna be awesome. And so I believe that the metaverse, to your point about you're saying learn, play, live, right? I think it's about ownership, immersion, and connectivity. So internet, crypto, virtual reality, for experiential. And so, like, I think the true metaverse that everyone is hoping for is those three things. And I think we needed all three of them. Everyone always says, like, well, VR's had 4 false starts. They have, by the way. But they never had the internet. Not one of the actual VR experience, like, time frames when people got excited about VR had the internet. Suddenly we have good connectivity. We have good, like, immersion. We're learning how to build good experiences. And then you add ownership in there, suddenly I have digital items that I can experience rather than just look at through a window. And like right now, I'm looking at my Bored Ape and I'm like jazzed, right? Like I'm like, oh yeah, that's great. But like I can't experience it, right? Like I have to imagine a little bit. But what if I could start to experience it? What if I could have a sculpture that I'm like looking around? What if I, bring together a community of Bored Apes together where I get to meet everyone pseudonymously?
Yeah.
So and every single Bored Ape's going to have a unstoppable domain. It's going to have a Web3 domain name that gives it a name, a wallet address, a identity that allows for the next future. Like, I don't see a world where DAOs take over and decentralized domain names don't, right? Like, I can only see a world because a domain name will start to build trust. Our items are going to have domains. Our individual are going to have domains. I mean, Matt Gould, he, the CEO of Unstoppable, he, pitched us 4 years ago. He, by the way, crazy thing, we had 10 companies in a session of Boost VC, and Nifty Gateway and Unstoppable were 2 of them in that one session of 10 companies. And so like we and it was 2 years before NFTs took off, and we just knew that it was going to be a thing, and it was great. So we're very
so cool. That's so cool that they were together in the same round. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Actually, that session had a couple other huge wins too. And so what he pitched us, you asked at the very beginning, like what was our story of Unstoppable, and so Brayton Williams, who's my partner, he's been, he talks to a lot of the Discords and he spends a lot of time on the Telegram chat groups, as we all do, and we got referred this from one of our other companies, and the reason that Unstoppable stood out to me, because it was during a time when ICOs were really popular, DeFi was really popular to talk about. No one was talking about NFTs, first of all. And then the second thing that was crazy about it was no one, for some reason, I had never heard anyone try to link Web 2 and Web 3 well, where we'd have digital assets. We have domain names. Like, people have domain names. But no one had tried to bridge that gap of ownership with a product yet. Everyone kept trying to do native tokens, like in crypto, for all intents and purposes, has been very crypto native. It's very much like its own ecosystem, its own culture. But this idea of being able to bridge something that people understood, which was domain names, to Web3 felt like an opportunity we couldn't miss out on, because I felt it was going to educate the next 100 million people on how to experience crypto. And I think we're still right. It's just, it's going to take a long time. It takes a long time to get 100 million people on the system.
Yeah, no, so it's actually interesting. Our first communication was I just cold DM'd you on Twitter, and I had gotten an offer from Unstoppable to be the new podcast host. And I just said, hey, Adam, heard you're an investor with them. What do you think about the company? Because I, as an NFT investor for basically a full year at that point, really hadn't gotten familiar myself with NFT domain names.
Yeah.
And so I had some questions about it, and you told me that Unstoppable is one of the companies that is on your never sell list. So if you can, I know we're tight on time here, but if you can tell me, like, why is Unstoppable in an impressive portfolio of yours, like so high up there, and why is your conviction so high on where this company is heading and the value they're bringing to the crypto world and just people and digital identity and ownership at large?
So, the dream of well, at least me as a venture capitalist or others, is that we have a small impact in establishing a value set, capital, and network to a company that defines the world in about 30 years, right? Like that's you want to be a part of a mission, a magical thing that ends up changing how the world works in a better way than was before. And so a lot of my job is figuring out what companies I would never want to sell, right? Like figuring out what companies and that takes a long time. Like it takes a long time to figure out which companies you work best with and all that stuff. And Unstoppable has, as a team, we backed them early and then we backed them again early. Like we were like it was pretty early. But as a team, they were able to always articulate momentum really well and explain the progress that they were having. And then when they asked us for things, great founders know how to ask for a very specific thing that changes that's important. Okay, some founders will say, like, connect me to these 50 investors. And, like, maybe that ends up being useful. But the best founders know exactly who they need to get connected to that makes sense and is important to their business succeeding. And so what my answer is really driven by the team again with Unstoppable. Like the founding team, Brad, Matt, and Braden, they are so dedicated and lethal. And they've really gone against the grain with building a lot of different things, especially I have a lot of thoughts on that, but like they've generally built it their own way while still really taking into consideration the market and understanding who the user is and who the customer is and how to build a big profitable business. They also had a history of building a good business before this. They had built a good business before this.
Yeah.
So that would be my answer. My answer is the team is lethal. They found market fit over the course of the last couple of years, and their vision is large. It's large. And so they really want to change how the world works.
And do you just like briefly answer on this? Like you touched on some of the companies you see you're investing in tokens, and Unstoppable doesn't have a token. And in a NFT world and a Web3 world, a lot of focus goes towards decentralization, and I think we're bringing a lot of value to the NFT like market and the ability to provide identities to your digital assets. But do you see that decentralization, the lack thereof in terms of how the company is established, as a detractor in Web3?
So it's so fascinating. I've been in this okay, centralization is not a bad thing. First, I've been in crypto a long time. Decentralization is not a bad thing. Centralization is not a bad thing. And we're dealing with what the differences are over the last 10 years. Like, we're trying to figure out what that means. And I think that it means a lot of different things. I think that people who I think there's a chance that every company in the future ends up being a DAO or a decentralized business, or having their own token. Every business ends up being a currency of some kind. Just like every stock, every token, every comic book. On some level, it's all just currency, right? Like, it's something that has built trust. You own a piece of it, and it either goes up or down. Like, we're all Forex traders now. And so it's like we're all trying to figure out what's more or less valuable than the last thing. And we're all really just pegging against the US dollar and saying, this is going to perform better than the US dollar. And it's a good bet. Just buy some Bitcoin, buy some ETH. You'll be fine. Don't speculate, and none of that is financial advice. Evidently, I'm supposed to say something like that. And so they have made, I believe, great decisions and thought very hard about exactly that question. And for the time being, it makes more sense to centralize for speed, centralize for the product, centralize for a lot of different reasons to be. And, you know, I think we need more than just Coinbase listed on the public markets. Like, I think we need who's going to be the first Web3 business to do that. And I think Unstoppable has a shot. I think OpenSea has a shot. Like, I think that if you're truly decentralized, you're not going to be doing that. And sometimes it's, I think for the sake of more education and more people being brought in for the next 10 years, everyone thinks that the world changed right when they changed their mind, right? Like for NFTs, for tokens, for all that stuff. The world is changing over time. And I've been here for 10 years, and we are way further along than I thought we would be, right? Like we're way, way further along. But we still only have, 100 million, 200 million, like 200 million wallets. That means that we have like 20x to go. And that 20x is going to be a hard 20x. And so I think that centralization plays a role in every business over the next 10 years. I think it's a great question, and it's a great debate, like it's a great debate internally, externally. I think it's an important thing to have. But for speed, for process, for organizational structure, and then if your goal is to be a business and to IPO, the question is, do you want a token?
Yeah. All those are, I really appreciate the color you added to that. It is a really interesting debate. And I would also double down and say, yeah, the founders have thought super hard about it, but I appreciate your take on it as an investor. 3 rapid fire questions to wrap this podcast up. Who's an influential Web3 creator, entrepreneur, or collector that's really inspired or educated you?
That's a great question. I'm going to say, the biggest influences in my investment career are driven by founders mostly, and then other investors. And so I would say the people who have made the biggest difference in how I think is actually, Matt Gould at Unstoppable is an unstoppable force, and he really thinks hard. He has he's really impressive. And also, he was the first person to ever talk about a digital asset that made sense to me for what now we call Web3. And then I have to say Brian Armstrong, because he was the gateway for me and many, many people to just deliver into the space. And I basically dedicated 10 years of my life trying to inspire more people to be in it. I'm still that Bitcoin guy to 90% of my friends, and I definitely am not the Bitcoin guy to me. Like that, and that's definitely true. And so, and then the third, I want to say Chris Dixon and Andreessen Horowitz. I have been fortunate to be able to have enough conversations with him to understand how he thinks and how deeply he thinks about the space, and I would give him a very high, like pretty good praise. There are so many great people who are in this space a long time, though. I always try to give credit to the other 4 funds that were 10 years ago. Like, it's Pantera, Blockchain Capital, and DCG, and it was just us. That was it. Like, no one else. So I always say, like, they define me a lot, as I hope I made some impact on them. So that would be okay. That was longer answer than you wanted, but short, like generally short, because inspiration comes from impact to me. That's sort of how I was thinking about it.
Yeah, I love the shout out to someone from Unstoppable. Matt Gould also inspires me, and so does Chris Dixon, the way he writes so clearly. He's actually the one that connected me to you in the first place. So shout out to Chris.
He's got depth.
And then favorite NFT.
I truly do love that I have AdamDraper.crypto, but there's no image to it right now. So and I am a visual person. I think it does make my life a little easier.
You can link your Bored Ape to that.
So I think
domain.
Once I link those 2 pieces, which I have not done, and I know I can. Once I link those 2 pieces, that'll be my favorite. But just based off of like my general use of it, my Bored Ape, which is right here, and like also on my Twitter account, I think that it has done a greater job to educating people and markets on crypto than almost anything, which is a bold claim. Like, I think it lowered the barrier because of how silly it is to people being like, oh, I could probably understand that. That's a goofy board. That's an ape, right? Like, I could probably figure this out. And I think it reduced the friction of fear that people needed to get. So I would say my Bored Ape. I have to say my Bored Ape.
All right, we're gonna have a Bored Ape counter on the screen. It might be at 15 now.
Yeah.
And you're gonna hate me for this last question. I'm sorry, but if you can make it one sentence. In 5 years, what's the craziest thing we'll be doing in the metaverse that we're not even thinking about yet?
No. It's a good question, because I think the thought process is there's a lot of natively crypto things that we're doing that we wouldn't have expected, right? Like the tools that we've built out, people are able to loan to each other. People are able to like these communities are forming in the internet to be able to do that stuff. I think I do think that the general crazy thing is when there's a flip where my Bored Ape is my true identity in the internet, and like people recognize that and not me in real life, and I'll group up with like my friends. And work will be going on quests to establish, like, kill monsters and stuff, but also, figure out where you're allocating capital. In my case, obviously, and so I think the thing is that feeling normal. Like, I think the big change is like the standardization of people recognizing my Bored Ape and not me. Maybe it's not my Bored Ape. I'm just saying like that as a avatar, my avatar and not me. And people building out pseudonymous like fortunes. And I believe I think they're going to be like incredibly wealthy people that we don't know, right? Like, and that's already happening. Like, they're incredibly wealthy people who we have no idea who they are. And I think that is going to compound. I think it's just normifying like late night hangout quests. That's going to be the weird thing. Like, you at the end of the day, the killer app of the metaverse is still just hanging, like being together.
Yeah.
And I think that and just the standardification of us hanging and all the things that go with that are going to be really interesting. I mean, it's going to be really weird to have like if I get hit, like there's a thing that hits me, or like that stuff. The physical hardware stuff's gonna be weird. Yeah, that's gonna be
awesome.
Yeah,
appreciate that answer. And just to wrap it up, can you let everyone know where they can follow you and stay in touch with what you're working on?
100%. You can apply to Boost VC. We invest $500,000 into founders who are trying to change the world, and we accelerate the sci-fi future. You can reach me at Adam Draper on Twitter, or actually Adam@boost.vc on email. Like, I reply to my emails. DM me on Twitter like Josh did, and I'll reply. I think people are always surprised when people reply. Our job is to reply. Like, we have to build networks. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you. This was amazing. Thanks, Josh.
Yeah, I appreciate it so much. Thank you for everybody listening to the Unstoppable podcast. We'll catch you next week.
Be unstoppable.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Unstoppable podcast. If something we said today resonated with you, please subscribe, leave us a review, and share this with your friends. And remember, this conversation doesn't have to end here. Tweet us your thoughts, ideas, or questions at Unstoppable Web. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.